Hello everyone, welcome. I was listening today to an interview a talk that was taking place between three gentlemen whom I follow. One is Alexander Mercouris from the Duran that you're all familiar with, and the other one is the leader of a political party in Germany, the leader of the Alternative for Deutschland, I believe, and his name is Maximilian Krah, Krah, and Glenn Deason, who I believe he's from Norway, a political scientist or a professor at a university. They engaged in a very, very interesting conversation, and perhaps many of you have followed it if you follow the Duran. What surprised me about this, well, a number of things, in that the politician was actually well versed in history and philosophy, and this is this is kind of a change, because certainly I don't find many politicians who have a sense of history. I don't know whether they perhaps they're not evident there, perhaps they are in their libraries, I don't know them. But what surprised me, one of the things that surprised me really, was the fact that he mentioned the Colombian philosopher Davila, Gómez-Davila, and he also mentioned another philosopher, Cortés, not the conquistador, the philosopher. And my reaction was, oh my goodness, he's heard of Gómez-Davila? Because I don't think that outside the Spanish-speaking countries, he's very well known at all. And so I went to the internet and I searched about this. Anyway, he's apparently very popular in some countries, in Germany, in Italy. The translations have been very successful. And I thought, has he been translated into English? And yes, he has been translated into English. One of his books is the Annotations on the Margin. I will put all this information down below in case you want to follow up on it. What is peculiar about this philosopher, he died in 1994, was born in 1913 in Bogota, Colombia. And he wrote not books, but what we call aphorisms, short sentences. That's it. So, following on the classics, and there are many philosophers and authors in the classical world that did this, and Montaigne, Pascal, for example, also. He never sought the limelight. He was just writing ideas that he had, and it was his brother who practically forced him to publish this. And he said, well, this is not a book, this is just my thoughts in many, many notebooks. And so he practically forced him to put it all together and publish them. And apparently the German translation is very, very popular. So that is how this politician Alexander Krah knows of him. So I thought, I'm going to perhaps do a video and introduce him to you by reading some of these short sentences, and then you can follow up if you're interested. The amazing thing is that, first of all, he's a traditional Catholic, very traditional person, and he was never involved in active politics as such. But a lot of his thoughts are about this new division in the modern world between what he calls the progressive utopian mind and what he called himself the authentic reactionary. Reactionary is not perhaps the best word because it has so negative political connotations. Perhaps a reactionist would be better, or something along those lines, because what he means is a person who is reacting to these new ideas, the modern man, and so on. So he says that this reactionary or reactionist feels uprooted and displaced in the modern world, and attempts to piece together the fragments of a shattered world. And so he says he chose, let me get my notes here. He chose this word reactionary because he says not conservative. He says the reactionary understands that adopting a conservative position is only worthwhile in those ages that maintain something worthy of being conserved. He had a sort of a cyclical view of history. You remember in another video I explained the difference between extreme ideologies like, for example, Marxism or communism that has a linear sense of history. You know, mankind is progressing towards this end, the perfect society, the utopia, okay? And the classics and more conservative who think that it is cyclical, okay? That you remember I spoke of Plato, who said that, for example, you have first the one, then the few, and then the many. The one, the emperor, the Caesar, the political party, that eventually gives way to the few, the nobles who take over from the emperor, or the oligarchy in today's world. Then that, or in previous centuries, then that eventually gives way to the many, democracy and so on. But then that, because you have to use representatives, that comes back to an oligarchy, and then it goes back to tyranny and so on. So the he had a cyclical view of history. To reconstruct within himself, he said, of this conservative person, of himself, to reconstruct within himself the civilized universe that is disappearing around him, he depends upon the distilled wisdom of the voices of the past with whom he maintains an intimate correspondence. He did not see reading as merely a means to further one's education or knowledge, of course, although of course it certainly is that, but rather as an essential spiritual exercise. Let me quote him for you. He says, "Every book we read must leave us richer or poorer, sadder or more happy, safer or more uncertain, but never intact, unmoved. If, when opening a book, we do not participate in it with love or even with disgust, it is better to abandon it for a moment until that time when a shadowy need or a specific demand awakens in our soul that passion that is brought about by such reading. Any book that does not find our secret selves naked, troubled, bloody, is a mere temporary refuge." And I'm following here. I have ordered the book because I had heard of him myself, but only with references to what other people were saying. So I ordered the book in the original Spanish, but I went to internet to see if I could find something in English to share with you. and I found two sources. One is a newsletter, the Imaginative Conservative newsletter. I think it looks pretty good. I think I'm going to subscribe to it. And in an article about him, they say, today Davila's words are readily apparent. To protect against the threats by everything, protect ourselves against the threats by everything from global pandemics to destabilizing cyber attacks, modern man, he says, is proving all too willing to sacrifice what little remains of his own sovereignty on the altar of an ever expanding administrative and technocratic tyranny. The modern liberal sees liberty, the conception of liberty is the belief for Davila that modern man has overcome the need for God. And so one of his aphorisms is very is clear. He says, the death of God is an interesting opinion, but one that affects you, not God. Okay, so let me then read to you, let me see if I can get it here, some of his aphorisms. Let me put them here so I can read them easily. And I owe the translation to a translation by Michael Gillegand and Nikos Saligaros, who made the translation for the internet. So I chose a few just to give you a taste. I chose 38. They're very short. Listen to this. Okay, he died in 1994, so he was not to see, for example, you Catholics out there, traditional Catholics, what was to come. But he says already, the Church used to absolve sinners. Today it has the gall to absolve sins. Anyone listening? Okay, number one, let me give you a little bit about everything, different aspects. 1. To compromise is to sacrifice a distant good to an immediate urgency. I'll give you 1 or 2 seconds to think about it. Number 2. The individual shrinks in proportion as the state grows. 3. The one who renounces seems weak to the one incapable of renunciation. 4. Vulgarity consists in pretending to be what you are not. 5. The incoherent interlocutor is more irritating than the hostile one. Didn't read that very well. The incoherent interlocutor is more irritating than the hostile one. 6. To think like our contemporaries is a recipe for stupidity. 7. To depend on God alone is our true autonomy. 8. Violence is not necessary to destroy civilization. Each civilization dies from indifference towards the unique values which created it. Violence is not necessary to destroy a civilization. Each civilization dies from indifference towards the unique values which created it. Perfection is the point where what we can do and what we want to do coincide with what we ought to do. 10. Every marriage of an intellectual with a communist party ends in adultery. 11. Modern man destroys more when he builds than when he destroys. Modern man destroys more when he builds than when he destroys. 12. In an age in which the media broadcasts countless pieces of foolishness, the educated man is defined not by what he knows, but by what he doesn't know of popular culture. Contemporary political ideologies are false in what they affirm and true in what they deny. 13. On Catholicism, ritual is an instrument of the sacred. Every innovation is a profanation. Okay, let me. 14. Modern man is a prisoner who thinks he's free because he refrains from touching the wells of his own dungeon. 15. Many love humanity in order to forget God with a clear conscience. Many love humanity in order to forget God with a clear conscience. 16. Civilization seems to be the invention of a species now extinct. Civilization seems to be the invention of a species now extinct. 17. In the Christian obsessed with social justice, it isn't easy to discern whether charity is flourishing or faith expiring. Let me read that again. In a Christian obsessed with social justice, it isn't easy to discern whether charity is flourishing or faith expiring. 18. The cultured man has the obligation to be intolerant. 19. He who speaks of his generation admits that he is part of a herd. 20. To be authentically modern is, in each and every age, a sign of mediocrity. He's not saying about, having different thoughts, but to be modern, is in each and every age a sign of mediocrity. 21. An individual declares himself a member of some group or other with the goal of demanding in the group's name what he is ashamed to claim on its own name. An individual declares himself a member of some group or other with the goal of demanding in the group's name what he is ashamed to claim on its own name. 22. Faith is not knowledge of an object, but communion with it.
Camilla Post-Till, Telegram Audio.
Sorry, let me get my sorry about the telephone. Okay, 2023. Total freedom of expression does not compensate for lack of talent. 24. Whoever betrays us never forgives us for his act of betrayal. Whoever betrays us never forgives us for his act of betrayal. 25. The modern world seems invincible, like the extinct dinosaurs. 26. This is an interesting one. They're all interesting, really. The racist is angry because he secretly suspects that the races are equal. The self-proclaimed anti-racist is annoyed because he secretly suspects that they are not. Let me read that again. The racist is angry because he secretly suspects that the races are equal. The self-declared anti-racist is annoyed because he secretly suspects that they are not. "27. The liturgy can only be spoken definitely in Latin. In the vulgar tongue, it is vulgar. 28. The wealthy man's sin is not his wealth, but the importance he attaches to it. 29. Agricultural prosperity ennobles. Industrial prosperity vulgarizes. 30. Adaptation to the modern world requires sclerosis of sensitivity and degradation of character. Adaptation to the modern world requires sclerosis of sensibility and degradation of character. 31. Nowadays, public opinion is not the sum of private opinions. On the contrary, private opinions are an echo of public opinion. 32. Excess of politeness paralyzes. The lack of it brutalizes. 33. To be unaware of the putrefaction of the modern world is a symptom of contagion by it. To be unaware of the putrefaction of the modern world is a symptom of contagion by it. 34. Intellectual vulgarity attracts voters like flies. 35. There is an illiteracy of the soul that no diploma can cure. Illiteracy of the soul. 36. God prefers an uncircumcised heart to a castrated soul. God prefers an uncircumcised heart to a castrated soul. 37. The genuine reader is the one who reads for pleasure the books that others only study. 38. Spiritual destitution is the one paying for our industrial prosperity. Spiritual destitution is the one paying for our industrial prosperity. I think he follows a little. I'll leave it there. 38. That's what I have. Many others. I think he follows really on the tradition of Goethe and Dostoevsky, don't you think? Anyway, this is it. I chose a few. When I get my book in Spanish that I bought, I will perhaps be able to share quite a few more things from him. So I hope you find this interesting. Thank you so much for listening, and bye-bye.